Hi, I'm Mark, owner and founder of theceramicshop.com, and today we are in our retail store location, and I am going to review one of our top-selling L&L kilns, the E23T-3, right behind me. Let's get started. So what is it that distinguishes L&L from its competitors? Well, the answer to that question is in my hand, and here it is, the L&L Element Holder. Made of cordierite. You can look that up on Google. It's a hard ceramic refractory type material, and these are inserted into every L&L brick, just like this, to hold your elements. The element holders are serving three primary functions. First, of course, they're just holding the elements in place nicely in those tracks. So if an element ever did come out, or when it comes time to when you have to replace your elements, they easily can go back in. The other thing these cordierite material is going to do is it's going to heat up, and that heat is going to then add and generate back into the kiln and help you get to temperature. Because if you notice on the L&L kiln, this model at least, there's only one element per brick. And in a lot of models, other kiln brands, you might see two elements running around. It's actually one element, it just goes around twice. But on these smaller kilns, this is a 7 cubic foot kiln, it's 23 inches wide. You really wouldn't need that. The last thing that those cordierite holders are doing is they really will keep the integrity of your kiln intact. From years of putting kiln shelves in and maybe hitting the soft brick, those hard shells will really protect that inside. And if you've ever seen an L&L kiln from 30 years old, it looks pretty much like this. You might be wondering, what are these porcelain finger-like objects sticking in my kiln? Well, those are actually porcelain covers that are actually covering the Type K thermocouple inside that shell. Now, on an L&L, standard with all their kilns comes zone control. So you've got 1, 2, 3, one for each section. And the idea here is, typically, the tops of your kilns are going to hold more heat than the bottoms, and this way the bottom thermocouple will sense that, and the idea is essentially your bottoms will then come on longer, helping to even out your kiln. One of the side features to these porcelain covers is they're going to protect your thermocouple. You know, these are very easily damaged for the same reason. When you're putting your kiln shelves in, they can often hit them. So with that cover, it's protecting it. L&Ls come with an offset already built into their to their digital controls to compensate for the fact that your thermocouple is now covered and might be reading at a slightly different temperature. But they adjust for that so you have a perfect firing. The other nice side effect, and they don't even talk about this, but I've noticed it from years of working on L&L kilns, your metal tip there is going to degrade, and that little piece of metal there is going to spall or fall into the kiln. And so if you've ever had this happen, say you put a white glazed plate underneath your thermocouple and it comes out and it's got all these little black dots on it, well, that's unfortunately your thermocouple dying and ending up on your work. So these little holders actually end up catching and collecting all that. So that never happens in an L&L kiln with these holders. But you just do have to clean them out every so often, knock out that stuff in there. But nice extra bonus. Now let's take a look at this lid system. First thing I noticed is this porcelain glazed handle. And you have to tip your hat to any kiln manufacturer who's providing a kiln with a glazed ceramic component. So that's kind of a nice touch. The other thing that you'll see here is this buckle, and that's designed to prevent the lid from creeping up or slowly lifting up a little bit, which tends to happen with lids under pressure. And I'll show you that in just a minute. But that's a nice feature to really assure your lid is tight to the surface of the top of your kiln. So let's just lift that lid up and I'll show you what I mean about that lid under tension. So that's hardly using any effort to lift. And that's because on the back side of the hinge here is two heavy-duty coils that are set under tension. Now you will have to do this yourself, but it doesn't take long. It's easy to do. And when you do, then you have your lid that's easy to lift. There is a way to hold your lid up in this position as sort of a safety pin here, which is a smart idea, but generally that lid will just sit like that in that position. And there's enough weight on the front of this part of the kiln that it's not going to topple over. Here's a smart idea. L&L's peephole plugs. They're solid, cast, got their logo built into the front of it. Nice. Does anyone actually use peephole plugs anymore? Kind of more trouble than they're worth, because they tend to fall out. When they do, they end up breaking. Well, the L&L's won't. They're pretty solid. I guess the original idea was so you could look into your kiln and look at your cones melting. Maybe you could see what's going on. Generally, I don't use them. I might keep the top one for cooling or looking in, but generally, they're hot to handle. They drop and break. But with the L&L, maybe not as much. Let's look a little closer at the new L&L control box. A couple years ago, they just recently put a nice little slant on it, so it makes it easier to read when you're standing. They also have the full instructions on how to use the controller printed right on the kiln. Kind of a nice handy feature, although I don't know anyone who's actually read it. The internet's pretty much going to help you through any complications you would need, but the controls are so intuitive, you really don't need much to get started. Simple fuse here, which is typical on a kiln, and a toggle switch. It's kind of an old school idea, but kind of nice way to turn on and off your kiln. Okay, now for the good stuff. Let's get inside the kiln controls, open up the control box, and see why they say this kiln is so easy. Two screws and you're in. Maybe now I know why this is called the Easy Fire. Really more easy to access. This open panel idea has kind of been around for a while. One of L&L's original resellers for this actually asked them if they could get a kiln that could easily open the panel, and they made it for them. I actually called it the Green Dragon because when it opened up, get it, kind of had a dragon-like feel. Well, many years later, L&L has revamped their design. You can see here very nicely, everything is numbered and labeled. So when you take it apart, and you will have to take it apart to install it, it's going to be easy to put back together. Let's do it real quick. We'll see what happens. Here we are with the control box off. Standard with all L&L kilns are these porcelain block insulators. They're used to prevent the elements from when they pass through the inside of the kiln into the control box so that they don't touch the metal jacket. They're heavy duty and strong and bolted in there. I like this feature. The other thing they're doing is acting as a mechanism for the connection of the elements to the control wires. L&L uses these stainless steel rods with bolts, and it is a little bit extra work to take these bolts off. It's a lot of hardware. It's a connection system that when you do it right, it works really well. So you will have a little bit more time inside the control box connecting your elements, but you picked up so much time on the inside with those element holders, if you remember. So your net time in replacing elements on an L&L is about the same, maybe a little bit quicker than your standard kiln. When you add the element holders with the standard zone control feature with porcelain covers, easy to lift lid, easy to fire kiln, easy to access control panel, with the option of quad elements, this is a tough kiln to beat. L&L might be a hot kiln for you.